The biggest mistake most men make isn't losing the woman they love, it's making sure she never gets the chance to miss them. Think about that. If you're always available, always texting first, always chasing, always trying to explain your value, she never experiences your absence, and people rarely appreciate what never leaves. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Women don't usually miss the man who begged them to stay. They miss the man who quietly accepted reality, respected himself, and continued building his life without needing anyone's permission. This isn't about playing games. It's about understanding female psychology, human nature, and the behaviors that naturally create attraction. Because people don't come back because you wanted them to. They come back because the version of you they left behind no longer exists. Today, we'll break down 6 powerful psychological shifts that make any woman think about you long after you've stopped trying to make her. Let's begin. One of the biggest misconceptions about attraction is believing that making someone feel constantly wanted will make them stay. Many people assume that frequent texting, endless reassurance, and being available every minute of the day strengthen a relationship. In reality, attention is easy to give, but emotional stability is much harder to find. A woman may enjoy constant communication for a while, but what truly leaves a lasting impression is how she feels whenever she's around you. If every interaction brings peace instead of pressure, confidence instead of confusion, and security instead of emotional chaos, your presence becomes something she naturally values. People don't simply miss conversations, they miss the emotional experience those conversations created. This is why emotionally mature men often leave a stronger impact than men who constantly seek validation. An emotionally stable man doesn't panic when messages aren't answered immediately. He doesn't create unnecessary drama to get attention, nor does he constantly question where the relationship stands after every small interaction. His emotional state isn't controlled by someone else's mood. That kind of consistency creates safety, and safety is far more attractive than emotional intensity. Many relationships fail because one person mistakes emotional dependence for emotional connection. They're completely different. Dependence creates pressure, while stability creates comfort. Think about the relationships people often struggle to leave. They aren't always the most exciting ones. More often, they're the relationships where they felt understood, respected, and emotionally accepted. Human beings naturally seek environments where their nervous system can relax. If every conversation feels like an argument, an interrogation, or an emotional roller coaster, even strong attraction begins to fade. Eventually, people associate the relationship with stress rather than peace. Attraction cannot survive indefinitely in an atmosphere of constant emotional instability. Ironically, trying too hard to keep someone's attention often produces the opposite result. When every conversation is driven by fear of losing them, they begin feeling responsible for managing your emotions instead of enjoying your company. That's exhausting. Attraction thrives when 2 people freely choose each other, not when one person constantly needs reassurance from the other. A woman is far more likely to miss the man who remained calm during disagreements than the man who flooded her phone with emotional reactions. She remembers the person who listened without becoming defensive, who respected boundaries without punishment, and who handled disappointment without losing his self-control. Emotional regulation communicates quiet confidence, and confidence creates trust. It tells her that your happiness isn't dependent on her constant approval, which makes your presence feel refreshing rather than demanding. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally distant or pretending not to care. Emotional stability isn't emotional suppression. It means expressing yourself honestly without allowing emotions to control your behavior. You can care deeply while still maintaining composure. You can value someone without making them responsible for your self-worth. That's the difference between healthy attachment and emotional dependence. When someone eventually looks back on the relationship, they rarely miss the number of texts you sent or how often you checked in. They remember how they felt in your presence. If you consistently brought clarity instead of confusion, reassurance instead of anxiety, and confidence instead of insecurity, your absence becomes impossible to ignore because emotional stability is one of the rarest qualities people encounter in relationships today. One of the strongest psychological principles behind attraction is that people rarely evaluate something deeply while they have unlimited access to it. As long as your attention, time, and emotional energy are always available, they become part of the background. Not because you lack value, but because the human mind naturally adapts to consistency. What is constantly present often becomes expected rather than appreciated. This is why many people only begin reflecting on a relationship after it changes or ends. The absence of something familiar forces the mind to notice what it previously overlooked. Many men make the mistake of trying to fill every moment of distance with more effort. If she pulls away, they send longer messages. If she becomes quieter, they increase their attention. If she seems uncertain, they try even harder to prove their worth. While these actions usually come from genuine feelings, they often remove the very thing that creates reflection space. When someone is constantly receiving your attention, they don't have to think about where it comes from or what life would feel like without it. There is no opportunity for comparison because your presence is guaranteed. Scarcity isn't about disappearing to manipulate someone. It's about understanding that healthy relationships require room for independent thought and emotional processing. When you stop chasing every conversation, stop forcing every interaction, and stop making yourself available every second of the day, you allow the other person to experience your absence naturally. That absence often creates questions that constant presence never could. They begin to wonder what you're doing, how you're feeling, and why your attention is no longer centered entirely on them. Curiosity replaces certainty, and curiosity is one of the strongest drivers of emotional engagement. This is why emotionally secure people often seem more attractive after a breakup. They don't spend every day trying to convince someone to return. They accept the situation, continue improving themselves, and focus on building a meaningful life. From the outside, this communicates confidence rather than desperation. When someone notices that you've continued moving forward without resentment or constant pursuit, it challenges the assumptions they had about you. They begin comparing the version of you they expected with the version they now see. Reflection only happens when there is silence between experiences. Think about how people value memories. They don't appreciate them while they're happening every single day. It is usually after time has passed that they recognize what those moments meant. Relationships often work the same way. Constant availability leaves little room for appreciation because there is no emotional contrast. Distance creates contrast, and contrast creates awareness. Another important truth is that scarcity reveals genuine interest. If someone only responds when you initiate every conversation, you never really know how invested they are. But when you stop carrying the entire relationship, their actions begin to reveal their true level of interest. If they reach out, ask about you, or make an effort to reconnect, it comes from their own motivation rather than your constant encouragement. Healthy attraction grows when both people willingly participate instead of one person doing all the emotional work. The goal is never to create artificial distance or punish someone with silence. The goal is to stop believing that your value increases by making yourself endlessly available. People reflect when they have the chance to experience life without your consistent presence, and that reflection often becomes the moment they finally recognize what they had taken for granted. One of the fastest ways to weaken attraction is to make another person's approval the center of your emotional world. The moment your confidence depends on whether she replies, compliments you, or chooses you, the balance in the relationship begins to shift. Many men unknowingly communicate this by constantly seeking reassurance, over-explaining themselves, or trying to prove why they deserve to be loved. They believe that if they can just say the right words or do enough thoughtful things, she will finally recognize their value. But genuine attraction doesn't grow from convincing someone of your worth. It grows when your behavior naturally reflects that you already know it. Self-worth is quiet. It doesn't demand attention or constantly ask for validation. A man with healthy self-respect doesn't need to announce that he's confident because his actions already reveal it. He doesn't chase someone who repeatedly shows a lack of interest. He doesn't tolerate disrespect simply because he's afraid of losing the relationship. He isn't willing to sacrifice his standards just to avoid being alone. These choices send a powerful message. His identity is built on something stronger than another person's opinion. Approval seeking often disguises itself as kindness. A man may believe he is simply being loving, patient, or understanding, when in reality he is afraid to disappoint someone. He says yes when he wants to say no. He apologizes for things that aren't his fault. He changes his personality to match what he thinks she wants. Over time, he stops being authentic and starts performing. The problem is that people are naturally drawn to authenticity, not performance. If someone feels that every decision you make is designed to gain their approval, they begin to question whether they are seeing the real you. Women are generally attracted to emotional strength because it creates a sense of security. Emotional strength doesn't mean being cold or emotionally unavailable. It means remaining grounded even when things don't go your way. A man with self-worth can handle rejection without allowing it to define him. He can experience disappointment without abandoning his own values. He understands that losing one relationship doesn't mean losing his identity. That emotional stability makes his confidence believable because it isn't dependent on external validation. Another mistake many men make is believing that constantly proving loyalty will increase attraction. Loyalty is valuable, but when it becomes an attempt to earn someone's affection, it loses its strength. Healthy relationships are built on mutual appreciation, not one-sided effort. If one person is always trying to earn love while the other simply receives it, resentment eventually replaces connection. Self-worth allows you to recognize when your effort is no longer being matched and gives you the confidence to step back instead of chasing harder. The most attractive people are not those who never experience insecurity. They are the ones who refuse to let insecurity control their behavior. They acknowledge their emotions without allowing fear to dictate every decision. They understand that rejection is part of life, not proof that they are unworthy. Because of this mindset, they don't cling to relationships out of desperation. They choose relationships that are built on mutual respect, shared effort, and genuine interest. When a woman sees that your happiness doesn't depend on winning her approval, she begins to experience you differently. Your attention becomes a choice instead of a need. Your kindness feels genuine instead of strategic. Your confidence comes across as calm rather than forced. Instead of asking for permission to be valued, you carry yourself as someone who already understands that your worth exists whether one person recognizes it or not. One of the biggest misconceptions people have after a breakup or emotional distance is believing that words will change someone's opinion of them. They think another conversation, another explanation, or one final emotional message will suddenly make the other person see things differently. But perception rarely changes because of promises. It changes because of visible growth. People believe what they consistently observe, not what they are repeatedly told. If you become a stronger, calmer, and more disciplined version of yourself, that transformation speaks louder than any attempt to convince someone you've changed. Many men focus all of their energy on getting the woman back instead of becoming the kind of man who naturally attracts respect. They spend months analyzing every text message, replaying every argument, and wondering what they could have said differently. Meanwhile, the most productive question is often ignored. Who am I becoming because of this experience? That question shifts your attention from trying to control another person's decision to taking responsibility for your own development. Ironically, that mindset is often what changes how people begin to see you. Growth isn't about pretending to be someone else, it's about removing the habits, insecurities, and emotional patterns that were limiting your life long before the relationship faced challenges. Maybe you lacked confidence, maybe you depended too heavily on external validation, maybe you neglected your ambitions, your health, or your personal discipline. Real growth addresses these areas because they improve your life regardless of whether the relationship returns. When your development has a purpose beyond winning someone back, it becomes authentic rather than performative. People naturally update their perception when reality no longer matches the image they once had of you. If someone remembers you as emotionally reactive but now sees you responding with patience and composure, they notice the difference. If they remember you as insecure but now see someone who carries himself with quiet confidence, curiosity begins to replace certainty. They start questioning whether they truly know you anymore. That shift in perception is powerful because it happens without you asking for recognition. Another important reality is that growth creates options. When your entire focus is on one person, your world becomes very small. Every decision revolves around whether they text, whether they call, or whether they still think about you. But when you invest in your career, your physical health, your friendships, your purpose, and your emotional intelligence, your life expands. You become someone who is building a meaningful future instead of waiting for permission to be happy. That independence is attractive because it communicates abundance rather than emotional dependence. Growth also changes the way you approach relationships. Instead of asking, how do I make her stay? You begin asking, is this relationship healthy for both of us? Instead of fearing rejection, you become more interested in compatibility. You stop seeing every relationship as your only chance at happiness and start recognizing that mutual respect, shared values, and consistent effort matter more than simply keeping someone in your life. This shift removes desperation because you no longer believe your worth depends on a single person's choice. The most convincing transformation is the one that doesn't need to be announced. You don't have to tell people you've become more confident, more disciplined, or more emotionally mature. Your decisions, your boundaries, and the way you carry yourself communicate those changes naturally. When someone encounters a version of you that is calmer under pressure, more focused on purpose, and less driven by the need for approval, they begin to see you through an entirely different lens because genuine growth doesn't just improve your life, it permanently changes the way others perceive your value. One of the most misunderstood truths about attraction is that people become emotionally attached not only because of what they receive, but because of what they invest. Many men believe that if they give enough attention, affection, gifts, and effort, a woman will naturally become more attached to them. While kindness and generosity are important in any healthy relationship, attachment doesn't grow from one person doing all the work. It grows when both people contribute emotionally. The more someone invests their time, thoughts, energy, and emotions into a relationship, the more meaningful that relationship becomes to them. Think about how people value different areas of their lives. They often feel more connected to the things they've personally worked hard to build. The same psychological principle applies to relationships. When someone has invested emotionally by making sacrifices, showing vulnerability, supporting you during difficult times, or consistently making an effort to understand you, they begin to feel a stronger connection. Those investments become part of their emotional identity. Walking away from the relationship doesn't only mean leaving another person behind, it also means leaving behind everything they personally contributed. One of the biggest mistakes many men make is trying to carry the entire relationship on their shoulders. They initiate every conversation, plan every date, solve every conflict, and constantly reassure the other person while expecting very little in return. At first, this may seem generous and caring, but over time, it creates an unhealthy imbalance. If one person is always giving while the other is only receiving, emotional attachment often becomes one-sided. The giver becomes more emotionally invested because they have continuously poured their energy into the relationship, while the receiver may never develop the same level of commitment because they haven't been equally involved. Healthy relationships require participation from both people. A woman becomes emotionally connected not simply because you love her, but because she also has opportunities to care for you, support you, invest in your happiness, and become an active part of your life. When someone feels that their presence genuinely matters, they naturally become more attached. They begin thinking about your well-being, remembering important details about your life, and looking for ways to contribute because emotional investment creates a sense of shared ownership in the relationship. This is why constantly refusing help or trying to appear completely self-sufficient can also create distance. Strength is attractive, but so is allowing someone to participate in your life. When you let someone celebrate your successes, encourage you through challenges, or contribute in meaningful ways, you're giving them the chance to invest emotionally. That investment strengthens the bond because people value relationships in which they feel needed, appreciated, and involved. Another common mistake is believing that love should always be proven by endless sacrifice. In reality, healthy love involves mutual effort rather than one person constantly overextending themselves. If you're always the one making compromises while the other person rarely adjusts for you, the relationship gradually becomes unequal. Over time, this imbalance can lead to frustration, emotional exhaustion, and resentment because genuine connection depends on reciprocity. Both people should feel responsible for nurturing the relationship rather than relying on one person to keep it alive. Emotionally secure men understand this principle well. They don't chase endlessly or try to earn affection through relentless giving. Instead, they create space for mutual investment. They appreciate effort when it's offered, communicate openly, and allow the relationship to develop through shared experiences instead of one-sided pursuit. This creates a healthier emotional dynamic where both people contribute to the connection, making the relationship stronger because attachment grows most deeply when two people are equally invested in building something that neither wants to lose. One of the most powerful forces behind attraction is curiosity. Human beings are naturally drawn toward what they don't fully understand or can't completely predict. This doesn't mean you should become confusing, manipulative, or emotionally unavailable. It means you shouldn't make your entire life so predictable that there is nothing left to discover. When someone already knows every thought you're thinking, every move you're making, and every minute of your day, there is very little mental space left for curiosity. Predictability creates comfort, but too much predictability can slowly reduce excitement and emotional engagement. Many men unintentionally remove all mystery from a relationship by constantly explaining themselves. They send multiple messages to clarify every misunderstanding. They immediately reveal every emotion they feel. They constantly update the other person about where they are, what they're doing, and what they're thinking. While honesty is essential, oversharing often comes from anxiety rather than confidence. It sends the message that you're uncomfortable allowing even a small amount of uncertainty. Ironically, that certainty can make interactions feel routine instead of engaging. Curiosity grows when someone realizes there is more to learn about you. A man with purpose doesn't spend every hour trying to keep someone entertained because his life is already filled with meaningful goals, responsibilities, friendships, and personal ambitions. He has experiences that don't revolve around the relationship. He continues learning, improving, and challenging himself whether someone is watching or not. This naturally makes people wonder what drives him, what he's building, and where his focus comes from. They become interested because his life has depth beyond seeking attention. One of the biggest mistakes after a breakup is trying to answer every question before the other person has a chance to ask it. Some men immediately send long emotional explanations, hoping that complete transparency will fix everything. But when every answer is provided without invitation, there is nothing left for the other person to think about. Reflection requires unanswered questions. Curiosity begins when someone notices a change they cannot fully explain. They start wondering why you're no longer reacting the same way, why you seem calmer, or why your life appears to be moving forward without constant reference to the relationship. This is also why confidence often feels intriguing. Confident people don't rush to defend every misunderstanding or prove every point. They understand that not every opinion needs immediate correction and not every silence needs to be filled. They allow people to observe their character over time instead of trying to manage every impression. That patience creates authenticity because they trust that consistent actions will eventually speak for themselves. Curiosity is strengthened when your life reflects continuous growth. If every month brings new skills, healthier habits, greater discipline, or meaningful progress, people naturally become interested in your journey. They begin to realize that you're not standing still waiting for validation. You're becoming someone new through your own choices. That evolution keeps relationships dynamic because there is always another layer of your character to discover. The key is understanding that mystery is not about hiding who you are or pretending to be unavailable. It's about maintaining your individuality instead of making another person the center of your existence. When your identity is built around purpose, values, and self-respect rather than constant approval, people never feel like they have completely figured you out. They remain engaged because there is always another reason to admire your growth, another aspect of your personality to understand, and another chapter of your life unfolding independently of their attention. Remember, the goal was never to make someone miss you. It was to become someone whose presence naturally has value. Build your confidence, protect your self-respect, and let your actions speak louder than your words. If this helps shift your perspective, keep investing in yourself because the strongest relationships begin with the strongest version of you.